Hi, I'm here to talk to you guys about capital budgeting. So Lori and I came up with 9 rules for you to consider with capital budgeting. Rule number 1 is that we'd like to use discounted cash flows, not profits. And the reason we do this, and the best example I can think of for you, is how we added purchasing equipment this week in your projects. So when I purchase some equipment, I'm paying for it right away. So assume I'm buying something for $100,000. I reach into my pocket, hand the vendor, $100,000 and said, "Thank you for my equipment." Well, accounting treatment would say, let's depreciate that over the useful life. And the formula is that cost of equipment minus any salvage value that you assume to get at the end of the life divided by the useful life. So if I purchased it for $100,000, and at first I'm assuming, you know what, I'm going to hold this equipment until the end of its life and just it doesn't have any salvage value. I'm not going to be able to sell it. So I'm going to take $100,000 minus 0 because I'm not considering any salvage value and divide it by 10 years as its useful life. So each year I'm expensing $10,000. Well, that $10,000 isn't coming out of my pocket. It's a non-cash expense. So we're going to add that back. And that's what we talk about when cash flows. So what cash is coming in and what cash is going out. Rule number 2 is that we want to all we want to do is consider incremental cash flows. So these are those cash flows that are tied directly to our projects and our analysis. Number 3 is you want to include indirect effects. And the best example of this is cannibalization. So Apple releases a new phone, it's going to cannibalize the phone that it sold prior. So we want to take the loss of those sales and include it in our analysis because we could actually be getting those sales regardless of not we would get those sales if we didn't create a new phone, right? So now that we create a new phone, we have to back out those that we're losing, or just consider if we should create this project anyhow. Number 4, sunk costs are irrelevant to future decision making. This is Lori's favorite rule. She'll probably do her own video about it, which is, I can expect that anyhow. And her best example is that you date somebody for 6 months and then you have prom. Well, you invested 6 months of your time, which seems like a very big amount of time. Well, now you don't really like the person. So since you invested all this time, should you still go with them to prom? Or should you just dump them and say, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to prom with you"? Well, since some costs are irrelevant to future decision making, if you don't like that person, you say, "Yeah, I dated them for 6 months, but it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to my next decision." My favorite is the next one, rule number 5, and that is that we want to take into account opportunity costs. And opportunity cost is just what are we giving up? So it could be time, it could be management, it could be money. So if we're investing in this project, we're giving up on a different project. If we're using this manager for this project, he's not managing a different project. We're using resources and giving up the use of those resources somewhere else. 6, beware of unallocated overhead costs. So your overhead costs are like your electric, your heat, stuff like that. Now, if I'm using some area of my plant and heat goes to that area of that plant no matter if I do this project or not, well, it's not really relevant to my future decision making for this plant, so I'm not going to include it. But if I'm using electricity to make whatever I'm making, that should definitely be considered for our analysis. And that leads us to number 7, which is assess your working capital. So working capital is the use of our current assets minus our current liabilities. So we're considering the liquidity of my portfolio, or when we're looking at our assets, we're saying let me take a step back. We want to look at our receivables and our inventory to see what levels we have. So the book actually does a very good job of describing this. So if we have a lot of AR, and so we have a lot of sales, we have a lot of AR, but we don't really have any cash coming in. Well, on the other side, we have creditors, right? Our creditors are looking at us and say, "You have to pay us money because you purchased all this inventory on credit." Well, we don't have any cash to pay you, so we're always looking at our working capital. Number 8, treat inflation consistently. So this is we'll probably talk about this more in economics, but you have nominal and real. Nominal is what we're going to use for this class, but it's something to consider, and we'll pick up on this in economics. 9, financing source does not matter. And the best example that we can give you is think of how can you raise money for your project? Well, I could issue debt. So we have corporate bonds, and we're going to issue this debt, and say my debt's 5%. Well, I could also issue stock or issue more stock and say that it's going to be 6.5%. We're not going to use that as our discount rate. What we're going to use as a discount rate is the risk that is tied to this project, or the opportunity cost of this project. So we call it the cost of capital. So when you're reviewing the worksheets that we gave you for those projects, it'll say assume a cost of capital of, say, 8%. Well, that's what we're going to discount our cash flows using. So it's a project that we're assuming we're giving up.